Britain's voters go to the polls on May the 6th. Headline-grabbing debates aside, with the finances of the country in a terrible state, what's the key issue in the minds of the public? It's the economy, stupid.
What matters to the electorate is their jobs, their money and their health, and how to survive the effects of the longest recession in British history since the Second World War, and whom to trust to help get them through it.
I'm a bit concerned that I may not get work.
Especially because there aren't really jobs out there, so I think that's a big concern.
The problem being that not only is the economy shaky, but so is voters' faith in potential leaders.
I think it's not clear-cut.
I've not really heard anything that we dislike or don't like. I don't think we hear enough of what's going on, in fact.
That uncertainty could lead to a result where neither of the two larger parties, the Conservatives or Labour, has an outright majority of seats, a so-called hung parliament.
I think, a hung parliament is the worst of all worlds. Can create a sense of policy paralysis, a lot of infighting between the various factions within government who want to pursue their own particular agendas on tax and spend.
There's been a lot of speculation that Britain's third biggest party, the Liberal Democrats, could play a significant role in a hung parliament. Even talks that one of their leading players, a respected former chief economist with Shell, could end up taking an active role in managing the finances of UK Inc.
Vince Cable has consistently called this credit crunch, the banking crisis, the recession and the economy right. And people remember it. Where I think there are chinks in the sainted Vince Cable's armour is that not every single aspect of his policy makes sense.
His experience in finance, so his background's in finance, he's very experienced and he seems to tell the truth.
Cable is now very much in the public eye as it becomes clearer that the determining factor in this election might not be the potential prime ministers, but instead the potential finance ministers. On the Conservative side is George Osborne.
It's quite fashionable to criticise George Osborne and downplay any sort of financial and economic capabilities that he might have, and I think that's actually very unfair.
People don't realise just how important politically he is to the whole Conservative project. He's one of the great authors. He's very close to David Cameron and helps David Cameron with his political thinking. That's very important when you're trying to win a general election, and let's face it, that's where the Tories are right now. They're not in power, and at this stage what they need is great political thinking. What he would be like as a Chancellor, only time can tell.
Whoever becomes Chancellor has a fiscal mountain to climb, with the UK economy limping out of recession and with a staggering budget deficit of $255 billion.
Well, it's a big debt. It's the biggest peacetime public sector deficit ever.
I think it's a quite clear division between the Conservatives and Labour. Conservatives are saying, let's stop spending public money on public services right now, let's start cutting back, let's start taking lessons from business in trying to be more efficient with public money. The Labour Party, on the other hand, are saying, actually, we can't turn the tap off now, we must keep spending because that will ensure that Britain doesn't slip back into a double-dip recession.
It comes down to timing. The worst thing that you could do is implement stringent budget cuts like they have been doing in Ireland, for example, but the lessons are plain to see. The Irish economy has effectively contracted by 20%, largely as a result of the very stringent fiscal measures there. Investment has collapsed by 50%, and it's creating a lot of social and political concern.
One bright note for the UK economy, though, came recently from the OECD, which may suggest that Britain is not in as bad shape as previously thought.
Certainly what was very interesting in the OECD's latest assessment is that for the second quarter of this year, Britain is expected to have the second highest growth rate of the major economies. That seems a little bit optimistic and demanding at the moment, but for sure there are certainly some signs, early signs, that the economy is coming off the bottom and that we actually are seeing some indications of economic recovery.
which would of course play well for the sitting Labour government's handling of the crisis by Gordon Brown and his Chancellor Alistair Darling. And indeed, as the UK economy has tentatively recovered, so has the current government's position in the opinion polls. But the public is a fickle beast, and there is one development in this election that could render all the financial hand-wringing irrelevant.
Of course, this year we're going to have television debates with all three leaders. I think that will be the biggest turning point in the game for all three leaders.
And already it has had an impact. In the first debate, the outsider, the Liberal Democrat's Nick Clegg, put in a performance that caught the public's imagination. His equal billing with the other two leaders also changed the game, with the gap between them narrowing further and making the result even more uncertain. The final debate at the end of April is on the economy and could make for very interesting viewing indeed.